Hello and welcome back to this episode of the Light Path podcast with me, your host, Kirsten, and I'm so honored and pleased that you are joining me to dive into a very personal episode, one that's a little bit different and one that has actually been weeks in the making. So usually I drop an episode of the Light Path podcast every Monday without fail, but I have stalled on that in the last couple of weeks for various reasons. One, I just got really busy with work, super overwhelmed, and as a result of that, I decided to skip a week of putting a podcast episode out because it does take a lot of work, not just to record them, but the work behind the scenes to actually put the episode out takes the majority of the time. So that's the first reason. And I think because of what I'm going to talk to you about today, I was able to safely give myself grace in order to do that. Little did I know that around the corner, I would be knocked over by my second flu of the season. This kind of winter season started with me having really unexpected dental surgery. One minute I was going in for something routine, the next minute it was like a 2-day saga of surgery, and then I got unwell, and then last week I got unwell again, and I was kind of thinking, goodness me, why? Getting sick isn't something that often happens to me. I think it's 20 years of being in a kindergarten classroom that really has boosted my autoimmunity. But I have been out of the classroom for quite some time now, and it just got me. And I think there's lots of energetic reasons why. One being that the earth is going through a major hissy fit right now. Those are the scientists and the people that really follow the earth's frequency have noticed a dramatic spike in the earth's frequency. Like, it likes to hum at around 7.8 hertz. That's its comfortable heart-centered frequency, but it's skyrocketed into the 700s. And so people are saying it's attuned to the earth having like a massive panic or anxiety attack. Now, we live on this earth, so we're going to feel it. And maybe that was it. Maybe that there's just so much change that has happened energetically or astrologically this year, and it's my body's way of catching up. Or maybe it's the result of what I did in June that actually allowed my body to feel safe enough in order to purge any kind of illness, bugs, discomfort that it was holding. And as a result, I have been unwell. All that to say, we haven't had a podcast episode for a couple of weeks, so I'm so happy to be back behind the microphone and sharing with you this episode, which, like I said, is a little different. It's a little tender and raw for me, because I'm going to reflect on what has easily been one of the most powerful, yet subtly so, months of my life. Before we kick that off, though, I like to start each episode by pulling a card, just to kind of set the tone and get any kind of insights as we sit and we channel and we discuss. And actually shuffled the cards before I pressed play, and I got a jumping card, and the jumping card was blessings. And I couldn't help but smile to think that, yes, so many blessings has come out of a June that I just devoted to looking after myself in quite a different way than I have in the past. And the blessings, a lot of them were not expected, or even I thought were desired by me. But here we are, and they are blessings nonetheless. But let's have a look at what's on the top of the card: surrender and release. I'm actually recording this podcast episode right under the full moon, and you'll be listening to this right after the full moon if you listen to it on release date. The full moon in Capricorn, which is really about refathering. It's saying, what are the things that are preventing you from building the life that you desire or being the person that you desire to be? And we often talk about remothering, and really this podcast episode is going to be about me and how I kind of remothered myself, going into the more nurturing side of things and side of self-care and devotion, But so it's so funny that the surrender and release card comes up as I'm out of that now. To an extent, I'm out of the focus of it. And we're under this full moon that says like, okay, well, where does the inner father play a role in that? And that is really around that discipline to self and dedication to self, and saying, okay, this is what you want to build. I'll help you build it, but it's going to require step by step, hard work, dedication to the long-term goal, as opposed to a fixation on the short-term pleasures that you may seek. And I think that this is so perfectly tied into this month that I coined devotion to her. And when I started this month, I really wanted to spend 30 very focused days on really paying homage to the version of myself that I know I can be. I think one of the most frustrating things in life is when we see an area or a portal of potential within ourselves and we are the ones that are frustrated with it. Maybe we're self-sabotaging. Maybe we're just not doing what is required to expand or experience that potential. Or maybe external circumstances are presenting in ways which make it feel or seem impossible to experience that. And that, to me, was the real crux of this month, because that's where I felt I was sitting. So in this month, I really wanted to focus solely on that version of myself that was in expression of, embodiment of, and in alignment with, authentically, the areas of myself that I was missing or that I wasn't meeting as yet, even though I knew that they were just on the other side of something. But I didn't know what that something was. And so at the start of the month, I thought, right, here's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to really embody her and pay homage to her, make decisions from her perspective and all those things. And I think that this is a really valid and effective tool in alignment, or that manifestation rhetoric where like act as if. That's what I went in with. That is not how it transpired. Even though, like I said, that skill and that approach is really valid and valuable, and I highly recommend experimenting and exploring that approach to life when it feels appropriate to you, to push you out of comfort zones and to allow yourself to, cosplay until it does feel integrated. Just so you know, if you are imagining it, if you can see it, it isn't really a cosplay. And I mean authentically, not because, I've seen someone else have that career, or I've seen someone else earn that money, or I've seen someone else have that relationship, and I've seen someone else have that body, they look happy, I'm associating that with happiness, therefore I'm going to cosplay as that till I get it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that version of yourself that you really enjoy being, the version of yourself where you feel the most expansive, the most expressive, and just the most grounded, wholesome, and happy. And what does she do? How does she move? How does she spend her money? How does she eat? All those things. I'm talking about that version because that's authentic. The other one isn't. It can be inspirational, but often it turns to aspirational instead of authentic alignment. And so I started that, but it didn't really transpire like that. And the reason why I did it is because I just needed to create a container for myself to really go all in, because I realized like I just wasn't where I wanted to be. And this didn't come on at the end of May dramatically, and I had this sudden realization I wasn't where I wanted to be, and so I did something drastic to address it. No, this has been chipping away at me, I would say, for 18 months. Slowly but surely, external circumstances really started to shift and change for me. The flow wasn't there as much, and I felt, and I witnessed myself very slowly start to slip back into all the survival and protective modes and modalities of being and decision making and acting, that to keep myself safe in order to survive. instead of secure so I could thrive. And that was the crux of where I had got to, that culmination point where I was like, this cannot continue. Because it's one thing to put survival mechanisms in mode when they're needed and when it's appropriate, and when it is short term, it's a total nother to then start living your life by design of it. And that's really kind of what I ended up doing. And I was approaching everything in my life that way. Because if I'm really honest with you, survival mode is really, really familiar to me. I would say it's one of my most relied upon, learnt set points, because I've been in survival mode for so long and for so many years. And I don't think that this is a unique experience. I think in many ways we all sit in survival mode because we have to navigate a world that is ever changing, that is unpredictable, and that often is not fair and inexplicable. You know, things happen. Plans get disrupted, people don't treat you nicely, and we're constantly having to adjust to that. And so to survive it, we kind of like have our own ways of dealing with that. And I just go into, like, my biggest one I know when I'm in survival mode is I go into, what is the bare minimum I need to survive? That was literally what I was asking myself on a daily basis. And so that became like my benchmark. And I would, and I have for the last 18 months, just reached it. And so it was like, what is the bare minimum I need to survive financially? What is the bare minimum I need to survive emotionally? And kind of booking in social occasions just to meet that quota. Like, I'll be all right if I do these things once a month, or I can get by if I have these phone conversations with these people just in a month in terms of connection and being held. What is the bare minimum I need to feel my most vibrant? And so I was hitting those quotas. Like, for me, it's probably more mental than physical, but for me it was like, okay, I need to show up to my weight training program 4 times a week, and I need to try and fit in this many walks, and I need to eat kind of like this to hit my bare minimum quota of surviving. And when you do that, you basically make that decision because you're so depleted. I was depleted, and I was depleted because I was allowing my external circumstances to really dictate my internal landscape. And there's no one on earth that doesn't go through this, because we're human. We're here having a human experience. We have to live our lives in the context in which we're living it. And for me, I just kind of got overwhelmed with it. It started with finances. And then as a result of that, as soon as I went into survival mode in finances, going, what is my just enough? What do I need to be just enough? Bang, I started hitting that and no more. And B, it then filtered into every other aspect of my life. And of course, I can sit back and go, well, that's super easy. Just like reverse it. Say like, what do I need to thrive, and go for that. But when the external circumstances weren't showing up to meet me, I had to be in survival mode because I literally had to survive. I just had to pay my bills. I just had to kind of get through. Anyway, all this to say, I found myself not where I wanted to be mentally, physically, and financially. And for me, I felt like, do you know what? This feels like a very quiet rock bottom. Now, I think, again, rock bottom is one of those terms that gets thrown around. And was I at a rock bottom? I don't know. But to me, it just felt like a place where I didn't want to be and I didn't deserve to be. But I knew it was up to me to transform it. Now, the way in which I perhaps had tried to transform it by approaching life of what is the baseline of what I need. Let's just focus on getting that. And once we get that sorted, we'll keep going, which never happened. So instead of approaching it like that in terms of changing my outside circumstances, I knew I had to do it differently. I knew that actually this version of my rock bottom for myself was an internal job. Because if I was able to change the internal landscape in the mess and the hopelessness and the survival that I was feeling and actually living, that I knew that that was going to sustain me so much further and so much longer than anything else. And what's really interesting is that as soon as I kind of admitted that to myself, that, okay, I need to change the internal, a lot of external things started to come in to challenge me with that. In terms of, if you change this on the outside, then you'll start to feel good on the inside. So literally, like, I'll give you an example of this so you can have some context to it. And it really affirmed to me that the approach that I was embarking upon in June was the correct one for me. In terms of, I'm going to shift the internal. I'm going to face life differently when I'm in the rock bottom, instead of fixing the external and then just assuming the internal will come along for the ride with me. So I kind of had quietly decided this for myself, and not too long after that, like, I was kind of pondering on it and what this would look like and having a plan, and really realizing that there was no plan to it. And that was okay. And again, that was different for me. And so I embraced anything that was kind of different. That I ran into a friend of mine, a gorgeous girl. And when I say gorgeous girl, inside and out, this girl is just the loveliest human being. She really is. And she's smart, and she's cultured, and she's well-traveled, like, total package. And I noticed that she was physically looking a little different. And so I said to her, how are you? And kind of going into the catching up thing. And she, very openly said to me, oh, I'm on Manjaro. And I was like, oh. And my first response was like, oh, I didn't know you were unwell. And she said, I'm not. I got it off the black market. I got it to lose weight. Now, fair play to her, do what you want, no problem with that. But when she explained her reasoning, was because she wanted this quick solution to drop 5 kilos. In my opinion, she didn't need to drop, like, this girl's gorgeous. But anyway, she felt that that's what she needed. And she said, oh, it's really easy. I'll tell you how to do it. And just playing along with the conversation, I was like, oh, okay. And I walked away from that conversation not feeling uncomfortable for her or anything like that, but feeling uncomfortable for me. And I'm like, oh, here is a decision point. Because I could say, in this example, my body's feeling sluggish. I'm not making progress because I'm in survival mode, all the things. How easy would it be to actually take medication that maybe would facilitate quite rapid drop in weight? How easy would that be, that I could reach for something external, to change something external, thinking that that would kickstart and help promote the internal? And I had to just laugh, because I was like, this is exactly why I'm doing this month, in order to not do that. I have done that in so many forms in the past, and maybe you have too. Like, maybe you've avoided singledom and jumped into relationship after relationship. Maybe you've jumped onto, I'm sure many of you have, those quick fix diets. I definitely have. To like fix the outside in hopes that it will make you feel more okay on the inside. And, maybe you've changed the job, or maybe you've booked a holiday in the hopes that it would relieve the stress of the job, but then you get back and it's all there. And I'm not saying that all of these things don't help. Like, I'm sure many people out there have many a tale to tell about how they did that, and it actually did kickstart their internal transformation, and they were able to carry that through. I, for one, know from personal experience that is not me. That is not going to be my story. I know how to do the quick external fix. I know how to do that. I've done it many times before, and every single time I've had success. Yes, it has kicked off other success, but ultimately it's gotten me 10 steps backwards in the end, whether it's like, in terms of the rubber band effect, what is pulled really tightly in the wrong direction is going to fling in the other direction, right? So that for me was this really big sign of like, you're doing the right thing by taking it slowly and going inward, not from a place of crisis, but because I was in disconnection from myself. I was in disconnection from myself because I was in survival mode. And when I'm in survival mode, there is no space for creativity. There is no space for joy. There is no space for an exhale. There is no space to work really hard and passionately on something and then take a break, because you're always checking in with the just enough. Am I doing just enough? Am I safe? Am I okay? Now, obviously, I've worked on my nervous system a lot. I've spoken about this a lot on this podcast, but also on social media, where I've worked on my nervous system a lot over the last couple of years. And so this is when I knew it was like a nervous system thing. I was dysregulated and I needed to get back in regulation. And I really want to stress this with you if you're someone that is delving into nervous system regulation work or just becoming curious about it. It is a process. It is not a quick fix. It is not a one-stop shop. I am evidence of that. But what it does, it just kind of gives you a lot more clarity. And I could see from the clarity that I had of coming into rest and digest and a place of expansion that I was so disconnected from it. And I knew I was in survival mode because I was disconnected from joy. I was really disconnected from clarity. Like, I didn't know what to do. I had no solutions and I had no vision for what I even wanted, let alone needed next, which is so unlike myself. I was so disconnected from myself. And so this decision to do it differently, to take a radical approach to self-care, was to turn inward and not to chase the external things in order to make me feel better or safer, and not to hustle in order to fix anything that was broken, because I wasn't broken. I was just in survival mode. And so I didn't abandon myself in order to band-aid over what was happening. Instead, I chose to devote. And what followed in the next 30 days was a remembering, and it was a realigning, and it was really an opportunity to root deeper into not just the woman that I am becoming, but the woman I authentically am, that sometimes gets ambushed by the other part of me that is scared and that is overwhelmed and that is very linked to survival as opposed to thriving. And so today in this episode, I want to share with you what I learnt, or the 4 biggest lessons that I learnt from what this month gave me. And before I do that, I will clarify what I did in this month. And I pretty much did nothing. So I had this plan. I'm like looking in my journal now as I plan this month out. I had this plan but also because I didn't really know what to do, if I'm really honest. I didn't know what to do. I just knew that I needed to reset my nervous system. And so I knew that the best way to do that was to do daily acts of devotion. So for me, I'm like, I'm gonna pick 3 M's: the meditate, the move, and the muse. So to meditate every day, I did not achieve that, but that was the intention. To move, some type of movement every day, because that's so good to connect you back into your body and get you out of survival mode. Like, I've recently read some research about how going for a walk in nature is really good because your eyes are actually darting across your head. So A, you're crossing the meridians of your brain, and B, you're realizing that there's nothing to fear because you can see everything. But when I'm in my home and I'm stressing about stuff, my eyes aren't darting around the place because I know everything that's here. And so I'm not really activating that cross communication of my right and left brain. And so I stay in stuck mode. So movement was a big part. And musing was like, I was going to take ultimate care of myself, like the grooming, the self-care. So resting when I needed to rest, eating what I wanted to eat, making sure that I was doing my skincare and like putting makeup on every day. That's actually something that I really tried to do. I didn't do it every day, but like really taking the time to care for myself. They were my only objectives. So what did I learn? Lesson number 1 was that the age old, we already know this, but healing, it doesn't always look like progress, but it is progress. And I think that that's the big one that I learned, is that I was having all these realizations, which I was sharing on TikTok at Kirsten Leo Official. So you can go back and watch all those videos as I was reflecting on what I learned that day, or what I remembered that day, or what I was facing that day in terms of my head or my thought process or my actions. And I realized that, like, when we're healing from something, because ultimately I was healing, I was moving out of survival mode and into rest and digest, was that it didn't look like progress. So like this month didn't give me this straight upward curve. Like it wasn't this great month. And at the end of it, I was like, tick, I'm done, I'm back. But what it gave me was these waves. Like there was times when I would feel energized and radiant. And then there were days where I literally dragged myself through old emotions that were triggered, or that I thought I had already removed or healed or moved through. And so what I learned is that when we devote to ourselves, it is not about perfection, and it isn't about consistency in terms of improvement. It's consistency in terms of showing up for yourself, but it isn't consistency in terms of movement. It's about choosing again and again and again to meet yourself where you are and to stay with yourself in the mess. And I think that is the big thing I did. I abandoned myself when I go into survival mode for an extended period of time. I abandoned my dreams, I abandoned my potential, and I abandoned my faith in myself, because I'm asking what's the bare minimum that I need. Let me just get that and then I'll be okay, and then I'll build from there. No. I stayed with myself through that mess because my presence was enough. Even when the progress was seeming and felt invisible to me during the month, I stayed. And that is the most powerful thing that we can do for and with ourselves, is just to stay. The second lesson I learned was that my inner ground matters more than any outcome. And this is a no-brainer. Like, I was motivated to go into this month so I can ultimately improve my external circumstances. I wanted to feel vibrant. I wanted to feel energetic. I wanted my businesses to flow in certain ways. I wanted my finances to be at ease. I wanted my body to feel great. All the things. Like, I did want that, and I still want that. But I also deeply acknowledge, and this is the unglamorous bit that you don't see on social media, and that people that are trying to sell you shit don't tell you because they don't want to disappoint you, is that nothing externally is transformed overnight. Everything internally shifted, but that doesn't mean everything externally shifted. Because here's the thing, when you root in yourself, when you're really taking care of yourself, you know what's taken off the table? The chase, the pursuing, the performing, the panicking, the external validation, the results. So you can't have both. You either are externally chasing and surviving like I was, or you're rooting deeply in yourself, you're accepting what is, and you're holding yourself there. And really, that's when I become more powerful, because power comes from presence. It comes from cultivating an inner ground. And I did that through journaling, through meditation, that movement. The self-talk that I noticed that was not helpful, the self-talk that I started to adopt. And this has given me a much better foundation to stand upon when everything else feels uncertain. Because the reality is, it doesn't matter how good a person you are or how hard you work, uncertainty is a fact of life. Like, it's going to come up. There are going to be uncertain times and uncertain moments. And so it's the internal landscape where we can focus upon in order to create that certainty, so that when the tide rises or the weather changes externally in forms of relationships, finances, work, whatever it is, kids, everything that can come up that is uncertain, that you've got that internal landscape, and that builds self-trust, that builds self-reliance. And I just needed to build that again, not have the external circumstances not be unpredictable. Third thing I learned is that self-devotion is not indulgent. It's an act of radical responsibility. And one of the biggest shifts that I was moving from was waiting and to being. So ultimately, when I was in survival mode, I was waiting for the external circumstances to shift so the flow could come back. Like if I could just wait it out. I literally have said that to people over the last 18 months. It's no surprise to anyone listening to this. You just have to open an email chain. You just have to look outside. Like now is a very difficult time financially for many people for many reasons, especially difficult if you own a business. So many businesses are closing down. And I have said from the start of this downward turn, which we've been in for a solid 18 months now, still counting, but I've said from the start, I just need to hang in there. If I can just hang in there, in there. And what's happened? I've just hung in there and that's it. I've just hung in there and it's led me to survival mode and it's led me to detriment. And it's led me to illness. And I know that. But it's almost like I was like, it's okay. I know this is bad. I know the weather's bad out there, right? But if I can just hold on, then once the weather clears, I'll still be here. So I didn't realize, I thought it was like resilience. I thought that I was doing the right thing and having the right approach. I was waiting to be saved by the external circumstances, by them shifting and changing direction, instead of showing up for myself. Not in a punishing way, but in a powerful way. And so I made some big decisions this month that I have been avoiding and that I didn't want to make. So instead of being in this waiting, this outsourcing of my well-being to circumstance, I stopped waiting for the perfect time or the perfect weather, the perfect sign, the perfect moment, whatever it is. And I just started asking, actually, if I was that empowered, what would I be choosing today? What is the smart thing that I would be choosing today if I was empowered? And for me, the smart thing to do was to take the financial pressure off. And so I had to make decisions to work in ways that I don't really want to work, but it's fine. It helps me to take the financial pressure off. Like I've taken on other work. And it's something that I've avoided for a really, really long time. But if I was in devotion to myself, then I'm going to give myself what I need. And what I need right now is some more financial security and abundance. And so I did that. And the external circumstances have changed for me because I've given myself the scope and the space for more financial security whilst this storm is still going on. And this wasn't comfortable. Like it was uncomfortable to choose that. It's uncomfortable to choose it when you don't want to choose it. And it can be even really boring. Like think about when you want to get your fitness or your body back on track. Like you have to choose the most empowered choice for yourself at every meal or at every time you walk through a gym door, whatever it is, right? You don't want to go on that walk. You don't want to do that workout. You don't want to eat the salad. But you have to kind of sit back and I have to do what's uncomfortable now or boring now because I'm in devotion to myself. Like I'm serving myself here. That is radical self-responsibility. And I think that's the biggest thing I learned. Now, because we live in an energetic universe, I have to say, as soon as I chose that, boom, the support rushed in from everywhere. And actually, for me, it was a financial decision. For me, the finances flowed in quite easily. It wasn't hard, but I built it up to be hard because I was in that waiting energy. I'll wait for the circumstances to be great. I'll wait for the timing to be great instead of just showing up for myself. So if you were in that, I know many people are in that. I'm waiting for the right time to start that business. I'm waiting for the right time to leave the relationship. I'm waiting for the right time to put myself out there for a relationship. We all do it. If you are in that now, know that that is not helpful. Take responsibility radically for yourself and be like, okay, if I was the most empowered version of myself, would I be waiting? And you can't say, I'm going to wait to be the most empowered version of yourself. You become the most empowered version of yourself by not waiting any longer. And you will be surprised at the myriad of ways life rises to meet you there. And the fourth thing I think I learned, again, not surprising, but that this rock bottom in inverted commas of mine really is a rebirth. And perhaps that's one of the most important things I've remembered. That when the outside world feels like it's spiraling, when things are falling away, when clarity isn't there, when you feel like you're losing, because that is how I felt. It is not the end. It's an invitation. So stop running from it. It's an invitation to look inward and meet yourself at the root of that. Because a rock bottom is not a failure, it's a foundation. And if you're willing to embrace it that way, then what you build within internally is yours, unshakably yours. There's no external circumstances now that I will allow to shake the devotion I have to myself. That's not to say my life is not going to be challenging, that hard things are not going to happen, that I'm having to continue to make choices I don't necessarily want to make or I would prefer to make. But I'm making the choices to stand in the weather in devotion to her. In devotion to what it is that I need the most to be the most empowered. I'm not waiting for things to get better before I allow myself the freedom to be better. And so that was my unexpected, in a lot of ways, devotion to her month. To just stop and really get honest with myself, to hold myself through awkward and uncomfortable conversations I had to have with myself, to love myself through decisions that I didn't want to make for myself, but I knew I was making them into devotion, to deep self-care and taking radical responsibility for my own happiness. That in itself, radical responsibility for your own happiness, is a total nother podcast episode, which I'm going to release later on because I'm still pondering on that. I think it's a big conversation. It wasn't a perfect month and it was not a magical makeover. It was a real, powerful, soul deep reclamation. And while the month may be over, this devotion continues because she, the most aligned, empowered, radiant version of myself, is not something I arrive at. It's someone I return to moment by moment. And I return to her not when it's right or easy or it's supported by my outside circumstances. The most important time to return to her is actually when it is not. Because that's when we build that foundation that keeps me consistent through it all. So if you've been feeling disconnected from yourself or like you're going through a life spiral, know this, that you can begin again, that you can turn inward and that you can root yourself deeper into yourself than you ever have before. And from that place, everything becomes possible. So thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you want to see the day-to-day input, go to Kirsten Leo Official at TikTok to kind of see how it played out there as a behind-the-scenes process. But until next episode, take care of yourself, walk lightly with love, and can't wait to join you in the next episode.